Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for today's session on scholarships here at Oxford Said. Can I just ask before we get started, please, that people can hear me in the questions box? If you could just type a quick yes that you can. Okay, it's coming through. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. So thank you again for taking the time to join us today. As a way of introduction, my name is Liam Kilby. I am one of the managers in the MBA Recruitment and Admissions team. And I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague, Claire. Claire, can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Thanks, Liam. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Joubert. I'm the Programme Manager for Impact Networks at the Skoll Centre, and I'll be talking to you a little bit later about this Skoll scholarship specifically.
So before we get started, folks, I just want to have a few kind of like housekeeping things out of the way. We will have time for questions at the end, but if you have questions that are relevant to the slide that we're on, please feel free to send those through. We'll get to them at the right moment. If it's then and there, great. If it's later in the Q&A session, we'll do it then. What I would say is that we probably won't have the ability to answer those really specific questions about your own individual profile. So please, if you can refrain from asking things like, am I a good fit for those scholarships, then we probably won't be able to get to those. We will have an email address that we can share with you at the end where those questions can be directed, and we do want to hear from you with those questions. But for the purpose of today's webinar, we're going to try and address some general questions that are probably relevant to the wider group rather than to an individual, him or herself. So we'll get started. We'll be with you for about the next 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if there are some questions that come through. And what we're going to cover today really are just very briefly the application requirements. We do have a webinar specifically on this area coming up. And then we're going to move into the different types of scholarships that are available and the two different pots of money that we effectively have on offer for MBA students. We'll walk you through the application system, how you apply for those scholarships, and then we'll talk a little bit about application deadlines and what that means in relation to both the program and the scholarships themselves. And then we'll have those questions ready at the end of the session. So again, please do send those questions through when you think it's appropriate, and we'll get to them as soon as we can or whenever is most relevant. So to begin with, this is the business school. This is Said Business School that you can see on the screen. Essentially, this is embedded in the wider university. And one of the benefits of coming to Said is that you will be a University of Oxford student and then a Said Business School student. We are the department of the university that runs the business-related programs. So you'll have access to the building that you can see here. This is where all of your lectures, your seminars, your 9 to 5 working day will be spent on this campus. And then you'll have another life, another network within the college system of Oxford as well. And that's where you'll find the tradition and the history and the buildings that are hundreds of years old. So there's a nice juxtaposition between the traditional and the new, and the history of wider Oxford and the modern forward-thinking home of where the MBA and the business school degree programs take place. So what we're looking for people that are applying to the MBA, and we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on this slide. You can find these things on our website, but we'll go into a little bit more detail here. So undergraduate degree is essential. We're looking for, in the UK terms, a higher second class, an upper second class degree, or a 2-1. In the US style GPA, we're looking for around a 3.5 or equivalent, and we'll convert that for you. You don't have to do that work. So if your undergraduate degree is from a different country with a different scoring system, we'll convert that when you attach your transcripts and you apply to the program. Professional experience roughly is around 5 years on the class, but the minimum we look for is about 2 years. That's 2 years at the time of application, not 2 years by the time you join the class. So please bear that in mind. GMAT or GRE score, you'll need one of those. We don't really have a preference, so either one is perfectly acceptable. Have some thought into which one of those might suit your strengths in the most effective way, and that's the test that you will probably sit. We look for around 650 on the GMAT to be considered competitive, which is the equivalent of a 160 on the verbal side of the GRE and a 161 on the quant. Any combination of those kind of numbers will give you that 650 equivalent and will put you in a good position alongside the rest of your application. References should be two. They can be one academic, one professional. They can be both the same type. I would recommend that you try and find the people that know you the best and have worked with you most closely, and don't fall into that trap that some people do when they just try and find the most senior person in their organization because they think that the CEO position will carry more weight. It won't. If they can't talk about working with you in a close relationship and your strengths and your development areas, then it will be a less effective use of your referee. We've introduced a video assessment for applications this year, and essentially what that means is when you submit the first draft of materials, you'll get a link to a third-party platform that is hosting some online video criteria. You'll see some videos from my colleagues. We'll be asking you questions around your motivation behind an MBA, some questions that are designed to look into your experiences where you can bring some examples of behaviors forward, and you'll have to answer those video questions as part of your application. So this happens before you completely submit your application. This is quite new for this year, so please give yourself enough time to complete those video questions that come after you've told us what your GMAT score is and comes after you've filled out the careers section, your post-MBA career plan. There's an extra step that if you've been researching the application process for a year or so now, that is new for this year, so please don't be caught out by that. The video assessment has replaced one of the essays. We now have just a supporting statement. It's 250 words long, and it essentially asks you to give us something that we can't find on your CV, your resume, or the rest of your application. Just tell us something we don't know about. And that can be anything at all that you would like. It could be a passion or something that drives you or motivates you. It can be the reasons behind wanting to do the MBA at Oxford. It can be the reasons behind wanting to follow the career path that you've told us you want to in the application. Really, that is a free format essay to write about any subject you like, but something that I think is personal to you. It's very important to allow your personality to show and to try and stand out from the crowd. We do have a number of people that are looking to apply with similar type profiles, and anything you can do to make yourself unique is really effective, and this is a really good chance to do that. Finally, in terms of English language proficiency, this will apply to you if English is not your first language, if you have not studied a degree level qualification at an English speaking institution. You may need to complete either the IELTS or the TOEFL or a similar English language test. Please do reach out on the email address that we'll share with you at the end if you feel that you might fall into this category. There are some options to waive this need, but for people that think actually English is my second language and I studied at home where the medium of instruction was not English, there is a very good chance that you will have to provide one of these tests. So as I mentioned, we're not really going to spend too much time on that. That is a brief overview of the application requirements. What we're here for today is to talk about the funding side of your application and of your year or your 2 years here with us. And I mentioned 2 years because we are going to be talking about the 1+1 program, just briefly in terms of scholarships as well. And so essentially there are 2 types of scholarship. One that the Said Business School manage entirely. We have control over who gets that. We have control over when those are handed out. And it's safe to say that they're handed out throughout the year. We'll talk about deadlines a bit later, but we do have scholarships available generally all year round. Now, obviously, if you apply earlier in the year, there'll be more scholarships that are yet to be given out, and that will decrease in number as the year goes on. So if you hear anecdotally that applying early to get good scholarships is imperative, I would echo that and say that the more is generally available earlier in the year, but we do make sure we have some level of funding available at all stages. The other type of scholarship we have is managed in partnership with another organization. So Claire is with us today from Skoll. We have the Skoll scholarship. We'll go into it in a bit more detail later. Pershing Square, which is the 1+1 scholarship, is very similar in terms of the way that it is run, and we'll go through those in more detail. So you have that in just a few moments' time. Essentially speaking, the ones that are managed in partnership with other organizations that are attached to the school or the wider university, they generally have their own deadlines, their own application requirements for the scholarship themselves, and they will have a profile that they're looking for in terms of who is going to be awarded that scholarship. So you have to be sure that you fit that profile in order to qualify for those scholarships. For the ones that we manage here completely, they are given out for a number of different reasons. It could be merit-based, so people that have some academic strength. You can see on the screen here, there are some regional scholarships, Africa, Middle East, to name a couple of those. We also have scholarships available to people that we just think are incredibly unique, that will bring something to the cohort that we might not be able to find in somebody else. And so we want to attract them to Oxford for those reasons. The general message for that first type of scholarship is that it's not just given to the people that have the highest GMAT or GRE scores. So if you're thinking that I just about meet those minimum requirements in terms of academic scores, does that mean that I won't get a scholarship? Then the short answer is no. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a competitive process. Getting into the course to begin with is competitive. Being awarded a scholarship is also competitive. Roughly speaking, about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people get some level of funding. So not everybody, but we do try and spread that money over as many people as we can to assist people in coming to the school to achieve their MBA and essentially achieve the career goals that they're looking to do with their time. So to go into a bit more detail, we'll talk about 1+1 first of all. There are certain things you need to know and a little bit about who we're looking for. So to be considered for the 1+1 Pershing Square scholarship, you must apply to the MBA by at least January. For us, that's stage 3. You will also separately have applied to the department that runs your master's degree of choice. And so for people that are new to the 1+1 idea, it's a 2-year program divided into 2 separate 1-year degrees. Your first year is in the wider university studying an MSc, a master's degree, in a subject of your choosing. Your second year is doing the 1-year MBA full-time here at the business school. So to be considered for Pershing Square, you will need to be accepted into both of those programs. There is an essay you will have to write as part of your application to the MBA. So if you're thinking about applying in the next couple of windows, November or January, as well as that supporting statement that we talked about, there is a separate 1+1 essay that gives you a chance to tell us why you think you fit the profile of what we're looking for. There is also at least 1, but possibly 2 interviews that you will go through separately from your admissions onto the program interview, specifically for the scholarship itself. Now that happens a little bit later on. Everyone that has applied and been accepted up to stage 3 are shortlisted by Pershing Square. That happens around maybe April or May. The interviews follow shortly after that, and then final interviews might go into June. And so really it's much later in the year that you know if you've been successful with the scholarship. You'll have your admission onto the course much earlier. If you're applying in January, for example, you'll have that by beginning of March. If you're applying in November, you'll know if you've been accepted before Christmas. So there might be a gap between being accepted onto the program and then learning about the application to the scholarship itself. Now, it's a full scholarship, so it's all of your course fees for the entire 2 years. So each of those individual degrees are covered with a living expense allowance for each one of those years. And so it's a prestigious scholarship. It's a good one to aim for. If you're considering that a 1+1 might be the right thing for you, then certainly look into the requirements to apply to the 1+1, the Pershing Square scholarship, and you can definitely have some success there. Now, who are we looking for? It's leadership potential demonstrated through experience. We are looking for some high academic achievement for Pershing Square, personal character, integrity, and commitment, and with an intention to focus on addressing some world-scale social challenges. That can be through an existing organization or through development of your own enterprise. But the idea behind that is that it's going to be scalable and sustainable. So it's not just addressing maybe a social challenge in a small part of the region. It's something that can be addressed in a much more macro, larger scale. The essay is asking for an articulated vision on how the 1+1 MBA, the program itself, will allow you to fulfill your career objectives. So there are some things to think about when applying for the Pershing Square essay. I'm just going to hand over to Claire. The following slide is all about Skoll. You might notice there's a little bit of overlap, but they are looking for some things that are quite separate from Pershing Square. So Claire, if you can just run through, please, what Skoll are looking for and some extra requirements or some deadlines that have involved.
Thanks, Liam. Right, so to start with, we're the same as Pershing Square in that you must apply by stage 3, so by the January date. And if you are interested in the Skoll scholarship, you will have 3 essay questions to complete at the time of your MBA application, and that is essentially your application to the Skoll scholarship. So the selection panel won't look at those essays, and we won't do the shortlisting until the end of stage 3. So it's only once we've received all the applications from stage 1, 2, and 3 that the shortlisting for the Skoll scholarship begins. There is an additional interview stage required. So after an initial shortlisting, we then get in touch with candidates that we want to interview. And there are 2 stages to that interview process. So it may be that you will end up doing 2 interviews, and then we will award the scholarships after those stages. In terms of what we offer, what this scholarship offers, this is also offering a fully funded MBA. So it's covering all the course fees for the 1-year MBA here, with a living stipend as well that goes towards your expenses, your living expenses, whilst you're here in Oxford doing the program. So as well as funding for the MBA program, you will also then get access to the Skoll Scholar alumni community. So at the moment, that is over 70 Skoll scholars. It's a global network of social entrepreneurs and social impact professionals who are working in social innovation in some way, whether that's running their own businesses, then their own enterprises, or whether they're kind of change makers from within an organization. And you're then part of that network for life. And it's a really kind of valuable, engaged, kind of vibrant community that stays very connected, and who, to the centre as well, we remain very engaged with. And it's just a really valuable resource as you look at kind of furthering your work and furthering your impact and taking those next steps after the MBA. So in terms of kind of the profile of who we're looking for our Skoll scholars, we look for people who can demonstrate kind of entrepreneurial action. So we look for people who have ideally at least 3 years experience of either being a social entrepreneur, so that might be that you have founded your own social venture, but we also look at people who have had maybe a more entrepreneurial career. So you might have led and developed initiatives that are focused on a specific social or environmental challenge within a company. And we also kind of look at people who have maybe throughout their work been tackling a specific social or environmental challenge. So there's a kind of thread to your work that you can show you have approached in a kind of entrepreneurial way, that you've kind of used those entrepreneurial kind of skills, even if you haven't actually started a venture yourself. So don't worry about if you haven't actually set something up. That's not necessarily what we're looking for always. So the selection panel also kind of look for in people is that you can demonstrate that you've created some kind of real impact, and with a focus on systems change, so that you're looking at the kind of root causes of a particular issue or kind of challenge, and that you can show the impact that your work has had and then that you've kind of measured that in some way. So we also look for just kind of the characteristics of a social entrepreneur. So, we look at social entrepreneurship as not so much necessarily a kind of something that you have done, but just as more as of a way of approaching something. So we're looking for people who are real kind of forces for kind of positive change, and you've shown a real kind of tenacity in your work. You might have taken a lot of kind of risks, shown kind of real creativity and kind of solving problems. So we're looking for those kind of characteristics, again, whether you've set up a venture or not. We also want to see that the MBA is really important in the kind of next steps in your career, so that you can kind of show how crucial it is in furthering the impact of your work, and really will kind of accelerate the next steps in your career. And then finally, whilst the scholarship is merit-based, we do look and ask as part of the Skoll scholarship essays that you kind of show a case for your financial need for the scholarship as well. So we're looking for people who otherwise doing the MBA would be a real kind of significant financial burden. So it is a merit-based scholarship, but we do look to award it to people who otherwise would not be able to come and do the MBA program.
Thank you. We've had a question come through around just how many Pershing Square and how many Skoll scholarships we give. So each year, so Pershing Square, let me take that one and I'll hand over to Claire for Skoll, but Pershing Square is around 5 people per year. That will maybe vary by 1 or 2, depending on the quality of people we get, depending on if we give some of that scholarship to somebody who's maybe already on course in a master's degree in the wider university, and they come in for the MBA and they didn't apply for both at the same time, but now they've been in Oxford for a few months and want to tag on an MBA at the end, they also qualify. So there are a few variables there, but roughly it's about 5 Pershing Square each year.
And for the Skoll scholarship, it's about 4, but again, same as Pershing Square, that may vary by 1 or 2, depending on the kind of quality of the applicants that we've had, and also whether we would sometimes look at partial funding. Typically, we do look at kind of the Skoll scholarship being a fully funded scholarship, but it can depend. But it'll be around 4 each year.
Thank you. The overriding message that I want you to take away from these slides, folks, is that the scholarships that we manage internally fully at the business school, you don't have to do anything extra to qualify or to register your interest. Simply filling out the application form and applying for the program will automatically consider you for those type of scholarships. Pershing Square, Skoll, and a few of the others that we're not going to spend as much time going into in more detail, but are similar in terms of maybe there's an essay or an interview stage. They will have their own application requirements. So it's important to do some research, both in terms of what's available to you, but also the ones where you feel as though you fit that profile. What do you need to do to make sure that you're in those conversations at the right time of the year? So have a think about which one you want to go for and make sure you've researched what their requirements are. We just had a quick question around the 1+1 program. I'll answer it now. Kristen, thank you for your question. The question is, would you qualify for the 1+1 if you already have completed an additional master's degree? Yes, there's no rule on how many master's degrees you get. So feel free, if you've done a master's in something already, to consider the 1+1 and think how partnering another master's in whatever field of study you want with an MBA is going to impact your career. We are very happy to have applications for the 1+1 for people that have already secured a master's elsewhere. I've had a couple of questions just come through about the webinar itself. Let me answer that now as well. We are recording the webinar. You will get an email in the next 48 hours or so that will include a link to the recording. So if you do want to listen back, you will absolutely be able to do that. Also, if you have registered for the event but haven't been able to dial in live, then just by registering, you'll also receive the recording as well. And that goes for any future webinar that we have. So just moving on, the scholarships that are open to you aren't just the 2 types we've spoken about so far. As you may or may not know, you'll be a member of one of the colleges when you're a student here for the MBA or for the 1+1, and colleges have their own incoming graduate scholarships that are available to members of that college. And so one of the decisions behind which college should I pick, where will I live when I come and study in Oxford, that might be influenced or dictated by which college has a scholarship that you think you qualify for or you think you would like to apply for. There are wider university scholarships open to you as an incoming university graduate student outside of the two types that we've talked about in this webinar so far. So again, do some research and we're about to show you actually where on the website you can go to have a look at all the scholarships that are open to you. It's absolutely worth your time to do so. And this is where your journey will start. On our University of Oxford graduate homepage, under the admissions section, you'll see a fees and funding part. And in there is essentially a search engine that allows you to input some details about yourself, your citizenship, your nationality, your gender, the program you're looking to study, and it will effectively spit out all of the different scholarships that you are eligible for. And in terms of what does that look like, it's this following screen. So you will fill out these fields as displayed on the screen for you here. Fee status, it's going to be home or EU or overseas. You're looking for the right year, you'll start your course in that year. Subject area will always be Said Business School. Do you wish to search for scholarships? Yes. Have you started your course already? Almost definitely no. Nationality or country of residence. If you have dual nationality, then by all means search for both, but you will have to search for both individually. You can't multi-pick and have more than one choice on that drop-down menu. Leave your college blank because at this stage you won't know which college you'll be a member of. Or if you want to just do some general searches, you can put in some colleges there as options and find what options that gives back in terms of the research results. You can kind of see those college-based graduate scholarships that are available to you. So you enter all of that information and then you choose the right degree. For us, it's the MBA. The fees that are on display here are for the class that started this week. If you're joining us next year or the year after, the fees might be a little bit different. So pick the MBA from here, and then you'll get through to this section, which essentially is just a list of all the scholarships that are available. So you can see at the top of the screen, we have that number of scholarships were found for a new student. We chose Germany for the sake of this exercise, studying the MBA. And this is where you'll understand exactly what you can qualify for and also what you need to do in terms of scholarships that require a separate application and or additional materials. So this is where it's really important to make sure you're doing the research that allows you to put yourself forward for all of the scholarships that you think you are a good fit for. We've had a question from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. In terms of general admission statistics, is there a disadvantage to applying in round 3 as opposed to round 2? I assume you mean admission onto the program rather than scholarship options. So let me talk about that quickly. We make sure that we try and keep that level of admission the same through stages 1, 2, and 3. And so we might get more applications in stage 3. We almost definitely will. It's a busier stage for us in terms of how many people apply. But if we have more applications, we'll just hold more interviews so that we aim to have the same percentage of people that are offered an interview and the same percentage of people that are admitted onto the program in each of those first 3 windows. What I would say, Sarah, and for anyone else that's interested, stage 4 can become a lot more competitive. The class is beginning to get a little bit full, and so your chances of admission in stage 4 might, almost definitely will, in fact, be more competitive. It will be maybe less chance of being admitted because we only have so much space left to really offer. We may even operate a waitlist in stage 4, only stage 4. Whereas stages 1, 2, and 3, in terms of admission into the program, there's very little difference in terms of those different application windows. Obviously, if you're thinking about some of these scholarships, you need to have applied by stage 3, that January stage anyway, and so that stage 4 April competitiveness probably won't apply to you at all. And so the next section is going to talk about the process of the application. Where do you look for on the application form for the funding options? And so This is what our application login screen looks like. If you're returning, if you're working on your application bit by bit and saving it as you go and going back to it a few days later, you'll log in as a returning user, or you'll create an account if it's a new application that you haven't yet opened. This is the checklist of things that you'll have to input. You can see there's a whole list of things here: qualifications, GMAT test scores, employment history, post-MBA plans, your essays. What you'll notice is that the video assessment is not on this list. So these are all the things you need to input first before you even get the link to the video assessment. So this is what I'm talking about, where you must give yourself enough time to do all of these things and then still leave enough breathing space to get those video questions answered before the deadline has passed. For the sake of today, we're talking about funding. You can see it there on the left-hand side. And this is where you'll see things such as the chance to upload your essay for Pershing Square, or the chance to upload your essay down at the bottom there for Skoll. And you'll see other options, other scholarships that we haven't covered in much detail today that might be open to you, where you will also have to upload a following essay as well. Again, anything that does not require that extra requirement, the essay or the interview in terms of the scholarships, you will be considered for automatically. There is nowhere that you tick a box saying, I want to be considered for all Saïd Business School Foundation scholarships. We know you want to be considered. I think it's safe to assume that funding will be of assistance to everybody that applies. And so we'll automatically consider you for those things without you having to do anything else. But please, again, I cannot stress enough, bear in mind that if there are extra requirements that you need, this is where in the application you choose to upload your essay for each of those scholarships that does look for that. There are some that you can see on this screen that require an essay, but also require you to tick this box just to show your interest. We use that information to shortlist, to pull off the applications from the system, so that at the end of stage 3, we can give those people to Claire in Skoll and say, these are all the people that have included their Skoll essay, and they use that list as the basis for their own shortlisting. So if you have not uploaded your Skoll essay, no matter how well you fit that program or that profile, you will not be considered for that scholarship. And that's the same for any of the scholarships that require that extra level of essay or interview. Just briefly about stages, we've closed stage 1. We're interviewing for stage 1 over the next few weeks. Stage 2 is coming up November 1st, stage 3, January the 10th, and that's the one you must hit if you're considering Skoll or Pershing Square. Stage 4 is April the 3rd, and that one is, again, open to all of our internal scholarships, but your chances of admission onto the course can be a little bit more frantic. Now, what I would say here is don't rush to meet a certain deadline because you think, well, I'm aiming for either stage 2 or stage 3, but stage 2 will have more money given out or more money left to give. So I'll rush my application and go in stage 2, when actually a couple more months working over the holiday period might give you a bit more time to refine your essay or answer those video questions in a more effective way. My overarching piece of advice is work on whatever timeline suits your profile and allows you to put forward the strongest version of your application. Obviously, with the caveat that stage 3 is a hard deadline for some of those scholarships I should mention already. Next steps, research your options. Again, this is the thing that I think is going to be the most time consuming to make sure that you have fully covered everything that you think you qualify for. As you mentioned, this is being recorded, so listen again to this webinar whenever you would like to. And then this is the email address that you should use if you have any further questions around the scholarships, around the admissions criteria, around anyone looking to get some feedback on their profile, or any particular questions about your individual profile that we're not able to really cover on today's webinar. One important thing to note is just you'll have your interview for the program, and the outcome of that interview will follow shortly after that. That same welcome letter, if it's a successful interview, will never include news on scholarships. Essentially, what happens is we meet as an admissions committee, we decide who to interview, the interviews take place, we then meet as a committee to decide who do we want to admit, we let you know that you have a place on the course, and then we meet again to decide who we want to give the funding to. So it's a slightly separate process. There will be a separate email that you'll get from our financial aid team if you are successful with your scholarship. If you apply in stage 2 and are not successful in terms of scholarships, but you have a place in the course, your name will be brought back in all of the other stages to compare you again with the new intake of admits from that stage. So just because you might not get a scholarship in the window that you apply in does not mean that you won't get a scholarship later in the year. That does happen relatively often. Also, once you have an offer of a place in the course, we are funded in different ways. We get new scholarships throughout the year. It may be that on our internal intranet that you'll have access to once you're an admit, you'll see news that we have a new scholarship that has been endowed at the school, which you might suddenly be a perfect match for. So keep looking at that news section on the internet to make sure that you are fully taking advantage of any opportunity that comes up. That comes to the end of the webinar. I do want to make sure we answer any questions that have come through. We have had a few through in the last few minutes. So for the next couple of minutes, folks, please stay with us if you can. I'm just going to mute the microphone just for a moment while we collate and triage the questions that have come through, and we'll be back with you just as soon as we can. Now, if you do have to leave, then thank you very much for your companionship, for your company. Hopefully we'll speak to you soon regarding your application to the school. Please use this email address, which I'll leave on the screen, if you have any questions over the next coming weeks and months. And for the people that are able to stay, thank you. We'll be right back with you in just a few short moments. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for holding with us there. We're back with you with some answers to some questions. So thank you for sending these through. Claire, the first one I think is for you and Skoll, and a couple of people have asked something similar, and it's around the requirement to have been working in social impact, the social sector, for that minimum of 3 years. The question is that a hard rule?
So yes, it is really. So we do prefer candidates to have a minimum of 3 years experience by the time you actually apply for the MBA. So that's kind of, and that's 3 years as well, working on a kind of single issue, if you like. So whether that's 3 years in setting up and running a social venture or setting up a particular initiative, you can, of course, have worked on other social initiatives as well, but yes, preferably you will have a minimum of 3 years experience. There may be some kind of exceptional circumstances where that might be waived if you can kind of demonstrate kind of real significant impact, but I would say as a general rule, work on a minimum of 3 years being the minimum requirement. Yeah.
Thank you. We've had a question come through from Wandile. Thank you very much for your question. It's around the scholarships that are merit-based. Is the awarding of those scholarships more based on undergraduate degree results or the GMAT or the GRE? And it's a really good question. Thank you. Without wanting to give you a vague answer, I would say both are important. We'll look at the profile of the individual. We're aware that some people's academic career, their undergraduate degree, was several years ago, and maybe your GPA or your result there may not be reflective of who you are now. And so a GMAT or a GRE is a much more recent snapshot of your academic strength, so to speak. And so in some respects, you know, that might be more important. The other argument to that is that the GMAT or the GRE is a 3.5, 4-hour test, whereas an undergraduate degree is a year, 3 years, sometimes 4 years, sometimes of real dedicated study, and so therefore is more reflective of your academic ability. So I know it's a bit of a cop-out, Wandile. I'm sorry for the answer, but it generally is both things hand in hand. We've had another question, again, same person, thank you. For those Oxford-run scholarships, do I need to be living in Oxford or on campus to qualify for them? So we have a rule that to be on the MBA, to be studying in Oxford, you must be living in Oxford. And so you'll be here full time on either the 1+1 or the MBA. And so we expect that as a student of the University of Oxford, you'll be living in the city. So essentially, yes, you will need to be living locally to be able to be even at the school, never mind scholarships. So the answer to that question is yes, you will have to be local to be able to do that. We've had a question around, do scholarships or can scholarships stack? And again, short answer is yes. Going into it in more detail, if you get a scholarship that is, you know, a full tuition cost covered with some living stipend, for example, Skoll that Claire talked about earlier, then you probably won't be offered another scholarship because all of your expenses are essentially covered for the entire year or 2 years if you're Pershing Square. But it is possible to get a smaller amount, maybe from one of our internal scholarships that we manage, or a couple of those scholarships that we'll add together. I would say if you get one of the named scholarships, so Skoll, Pershing Square, Weidenfeld, Hoffman, Chevening, Limbury, Jacobs, those kind of scholarships will probably just be those on their own, simply because they are a substantial contribution towards your costs. And we would then try and spread the other scholarships around more people, or as many people as we can, for that reason. We've had a question regarding an international student who does not get funding. You know, are there any other ways that you might be able to fund your study? And we do have a number of people that look at maybe securing a loan through an educational loan company. We have some relationships that we can talk to you about with certain loan companies that might be of use to you. But if you think about how many people get funding, and it is, as I mentioned before, 1 in 4, 1 in 5, then there are a significant number of people that are looking to fund their scholarship, or sorry, excuse me, to fund their MBA in other ways outside of receiving a scholarship. Maddie Parrish, it is nice to see you. Thank you for your question. Hi, Liam. Maddie Parrish here. For the college scholarships, does the stage you apply and impact the availability of these scholarships? Good question. Essentially, yes, it will, and let me explain why. There are some colleges that will take maybe 70 MBAs. I think we've had this discussion before, Maddie. There are some colleges that take maybe 5 MBAs. And so if you're in a college, or you're aiming for a college that offers a scholarship that takes 5 MBAs, and you're applying in maybe stage 2 or stage 3, there is a chance that those 5 places at the college have been taken already, which means that the scholarship available to people in that college automatically then is gone, because you won't be able to apply for a place because it's already full. And so if you're thinking about a college scholarship that you think really fits you, and you and I can have a conversation, offline about how many places has that college offered to MBAs in the past and how quickly are those places taken, then it can form part of your strategy around when you apply. Again, with that overarching piece of advice that you apply when is the right time for you, then yes, it can impact it. If you're aiming for a college that takes 70 MBAs and they have scholarships available all year round, then no, it won't really impact it at all. So it depends on the college and depends on your own personal circumstances. But yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. With regards to GPA, we've had a question around, is 3.5 a hard cutoff? Absolutely not, no. As I mentioned before, we recognize that your academic career may have been several years ago in some cases. The average age of our MBA cohort is around 29 years old. The age range is 25 up to around mid-30s. And so people have been out of college now for some time, and we know that your GPA maybe 10 years ago is not reflective of you as a person now. So I'm very happy to share that people with a lower GPA than that 3.5 advertised minimum, people with a lower than advertised 650 GMAT have been successful in applying to the course. And people that have come out with a first class degree or maybe really high GMATs may not have been the right kind of personality that we're looking for the cohort, and therefore haven't been successful. So academic strength is certainly something to be proud of and certainly something to include in your application if you have it. But if you're sat there today thinking, well, my GPA is lower than 3.5, I therefore cannot apply, that certainly is not the case. You should feel comfortable that you'll have strengths in your application elsewhere that somebody else may not be able to share with you. And that's where we can talk about what you can bring to the class, regardless of what your GPA or your GMAT is. Now, please don't get me wrong. There are some lower limits that we think actually, no matter how strong your career plan might be, no matter how strong your personality might be, this is a little bit too low to be considered for Oxford. We are the University of Oxford. It is a tricky place to get into. There are expectations from the colleges specifically that they want to have the best and the brightest in terms of GPA and GMAT or GRE, but we have some flexibility. So please don't automatically assume that you cannot apply if you don't meet that minimum criteria. Guys, I think that's all of the questions. Thank you again for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure having your company. We're going to end the webinar here. So again, if you have any questions, please do send it through to that email address on the screen. Reach out to us if you want to come and see us here at the school. Come and visit us. We have some open days that you can join and register. We have a formal campus visit request form you can fill out to come and see us. Again, just to clarify, you'll receive an email on the email address you used to register for today's session in the next couple of days with a link to a recording. So if you want to listen to this again, you'll be able to do so sometime just before the weekend. Thank you, everyone. It's been great to see you. We'll speak to you very soon, hopefully, and good luck with any application you choose to make in the future. Bye for now.